Welcome, I'm Karen Litz, president of the Network of Enlightened Women. I'm excited today to be with Claudia Rosett, Foreign Policy Fellow with the Independent Women's Forum and an award-winning journalist. She has reported over the past 37 years from Asia, the former Soviet Union, Latin America, and the Middle East. She is widely credited with groundbreaking reporting on corruption at the UN. Previously, she was a staff writer at the Wall Street Journal and regularly appears on TV. She holds a BA from Yale, an MA in English from Columbia University, and an MBA with a specialization in finance from the University of Chicago's Graduate School of Business. Claudia, we are thrilled to have you with us today to talk about what's happening in Ukraine.
Yes, glad to be here. Thank you.
This is a topic that I think a month ago or 2 months ago, not that many people were thinking about. It wasn't making big national headlines here in the United States, but now it's everywhere. Could you talk about how we got to this moment in Ukraine and why Russia's invading now?
Yeah, it's everywhere now because it's a war. It has actually turned into a war in Europe like we haven't seen since the end of World War II. How did we get here? Gosh, so a long story, but I'm going to start with President Biden because when he came into office, President Putin was more or less still contained in his box for the time being. He had already, let's go back, President Putin took power at the end of New Year's Eve, 1999. They love auspicious dates in this saga, when President Boris Yeltsin suddenly resigned. Unexpectedly, Putin became president, acting president, got him. He always wins elections, and he has ruled Russia for 22 years now. Turning
it's been so long.
Yeah, well, he's sort of fiddled that by every election he's in. You'll be shocked to hear he has won.
I imagine by huge percentages, or at least that's what's reported, right?
Quite enough. Yeah, exactly. He's effectively there as president for life at this point, unless he's removed by a coup or something happens to him, or just carrying on for years to come. He aspires to reassemble the old Russian Empire. He's not after a communist empire. He doesn't actually like communism. He saw how devastating that was. In fact, on that score, he makes a pretty good case that we should pay attention to here. You don't ever want that anywhere. However, what he wants that is not good is to take, when the Soviet Union collapsed, all these parts of its dominions broke free. The Soviet Union had 15 Soviet socialist republics. The residual heir of all that was Russia. So there were 14 others that broke away and became independent countries. And he's now trying to reassemble this. One of them was Belarus, which is basically his mascot state at this point. They're completely enthralled to Russia. In fact, they're poised to help with the invasion of Ukraine. Another one was Ukraine, which was the second most important one in that union after Russia itself. And others like Georgia. He tried invading Georgia in 2008, where Russia was already supporting these separatist enclaves. You've been hearing about the playbook. Okay, what he does is he stirs up trouble with secessionist areas with ethnic Russians living in these other countries, and then says they need help. I'm going to go in and help them. Takes over.
He's been trying to do this with Ukraine, right? In two areas.
He tried it with Georgia in 2008 when he had a much weaker military. We had a more resolute President Bush, although he was at that point kind of fighting a lot of battles on the home front about his invasion of Iraq. And Putin left having taken part of Georgia effectively with two separatist enclaves, but he was pushed out. He didn't actually invade and take the whole country. Then in 2014, he seized the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. That was important because Crimea has a major Russian military port, Sevastopol, home to the Black Sea Fleet. Tell you more about that, but he just took that. He went in, annexed it, basically dared the world to do anything. President Obama was then in the White House. Joe Biden was his vice president. And
that's interesting. President Biden should have seen this coming in a way, right? Like this isn't.
Of course. This was so clearly coming. And what President Obama did was he scolded and he put on sanctions, but he didn't do anything enough to reverse this. What played into this was at the time that Putin seized Crimea, President Obama was trying to negotiate an Iran nuclear deal in Vienna and then Geneva, which he got. It turned out to be it was a terrible, disastrous deal. President Trump was right to repeal it when he came in. But to get to that deal, this is important, President Obama needed the permanent 5 members of the Security Council plus the European Union at the table. It was called the P5+1. Russia is one of them. He needed Russia at the table. So he couldn't afford to alienate Russia too much. So they were being friendly to Russia at the Iran talks while they were scolding Russia over grabbing part of another country, which was quite serious because part of the whole idea of a modern liberal order in the world is that you don't just grab another part of a country. That's the law of the jungle. That's where we are now. So Putin got to keep Crimea. President Obama did nothing effective, got his Iran deal, Putin got Crimea. Time goes by, President Trump came in, got rid of the Iran deal, and was sufficiently enough of a deterrent so that Putin really didn't make this kind of aggressive move for some years. Remember, President Trump actually sent Tomahawk missiles into Syria. He actually took out a major Iranian terrorist leader. He did things like that. Then President Biden came in, and now we get to the point with your question. How did we get here? He rolled out a red carpet for Putin to do this. I'm sorry to say that, but it's true. The first day in office, he killed the Keystone Pipeline. This was important because the US has become energy independent. For Russia, oil and gas are the mainstay of everything that Putin does. It's more than half of their economy. They're among the world's top exporters. They sell it for hard currency. That's what funds this whole machine you're now watching in Ukraine. And when President Biden began choking the energy industry in the US, that was great for Putin because everybody was buying from him. We buy from him. And then we went running around looking for, can we get more oil? Can we get more fuel from OPEC, from wherever? That was a terrible mistake. And then President Biden waved ahead the sort of additional large Russian pipeline for gas from Russia to Germany, which was being built, saying, oh, it's a fait accompli, well, we might as well go ahead. Another green light to Putin. That said, actually what it said was there's an idiotic energy policy that's now come into play in the United States. Then came out Afghanistan. And I think that was a major green light because that was such a disaster for the US. Instead of, we were run out of Afghanistan, out of Kabul, out of our embassy, by the Taliban. Well, if the Taliban can do that to us, that's a message to the Kremlin that says, which is nuclear armed, has one of the world's largest armies and a long sort of tradition of predatory behavior. Go ahead. And Putin again had already tried. Last spring, Putin began massing troops along the border of Ukraine. Then he kind of stopped. And this was celebrated by President Biden as a victory for diplomacy. There's nothing of the sort. It was a pause. President Biden then had a bilateral summit with Putin in Geneva, dignified him with a summit. And another thing where it was sort of the US appeasing and hurting itself and the sort of signaling to the world, we won't stand up to even the Taliban. So the rest of you, especially China, come on. And so last fall, yeah.
So it seems to me, as you're talking about this narrative, that American leadership really matters. The leadership of the president makes a big difference, and that Putin reads those signals to decide what actions he's going to take. Is that a fair take from what you're saying?
Yeah, very. I mean, you're hearing a lot right now about Putin is crazy. And well, Putin may be crazy in the sense that he's always been crazy. He's a really hardened KGB, canny man. You don't rule Russia for 22 years, stay in power without being very good at power games. And whatever might be going on with him at the moment, I think it's very clear to see. He sized up America. And yes, leadership matters. He looked at President Putin and said, this guy's basically either asleep on the job or backing down in every confrontation. He's busy virtue signaling to the planet while hurting his own country. Time to go. This is a window of opportunity on Ukraine. He'd already taken Crimea. He began massively building up troops last fall. We had months to watch this take shape, and adding and adding. And the administration, the Biden administration, began this frenzy of diplomacy. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and were flying around and negotiating and discussing. Vice President Kamala Harris went to Munich just before this for an annual security conference. Everybody was talking about it. Endless talk, but they really did nothing. At the last minute, they were sort of shipping some weapons to Ukraine, but even sanctions, which probably aren't enough to change this thing, however great they sound right now, they delayed until after it was clear that Putin was about to invade, and then they began sort of really putting them on once war had broken out. So bottom line, yeah.
So do you think if we had a president who showed strong leadership in terms of defending the current kind of intellectual or international order and standing up for democracy, do you think that Putin would have invaded?
No, no, actually, I think, let me tell you something that I think for most of your members and viewers, this is not recent history, but let me give you a little thing that matters. Way back in 1980, during the Cold War, when it was the US and the Soviet Union in a big showdown, we had Jimmy Carter as president. And he was a terrible president. He was a weak man. It was on his watch that the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It was on his watch that the Iranian Islamic Revolution took place, these things that bedevil us in knock-on effects today. And he was sort of agog each time. Oh my goodness, who'd expected that? Well, he'd invited it, basically. And the next president elected was Ronald Reagan. And he came in. And I mean, you run a real world example answering your question, does leadership matter? He said, we're not going to do this. We won't stand for this. He called the Soviet Union an evil empire. Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall in Berlin. And he engaged in a military buildup. Guns matter in the world. You know, it's not all a talking shop. It could get pretty rough. He engaged in a military buildup where the Soviet Union just didn't have the efficiency to keep up. And things began to fall apart there. It was already a bad system, but they did one thing quite well. They made weapons and killed people. They were good at that. Anyway, Ronald Reagan basically ran them out of business. And 3 years after his second term ended, the Soviet Union collapsed. Its satellites in Eastern Europe had already broken free 2 years earlier. It really mattered, and it matters now. And one of the things that is a great worry, I think, is President Biden's record since he became president on foreign policy has been pretty much atrocious. And he has to do something to turn around the expectations of the world's predators, especially China, that they can do things like this and get away with it. Because right now it looks like, oh, President Putin is the world's pariah and all, he can never prevail. That's in the talking shops right now. We're in the, as I wrote in an article for PJ Media, we're in the spectator seats at what is effectively being handled as the Colosseum. Ukraine is in the arena. They're fighting for their lives. Those people are actually dying. And that's where this fight is being decided right now, not in the seminars. That's where it matters.
And the images are just heartbreaking of a member of parliament, a woman who I'd say doesn't look that much different in age from me, is saying that she's learned to use a military weapon to try to defend her homeland. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful image. Or the mom who recently had a baby, underground. She's worried.
That's war. And if you don't want to end up in the same position, it is really important with our own military. The mission of a military properly handled is pretty simple, basically. It is to deter or win wars or win wars. Deter them ideally so you don't have to fight them. Make it credibly clear that nobody should attack you because they will be really sorry. But if they do attack you, win the war. Right now, the US military is being sort of reconfigured under the Biden administration as this woke, outfit dedicated to sensitivity, eco-fuels, electric mail delivery vehicles, things like that. No, we actually are facing, especially China, which right now is sort of off the radar because everyone's focused on a war in Eastern Europe. But
And I want to get to that. Definitely.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I want to hit on, I've seen you write on Russia and China and their growing relationship. Could you talk about that?
It's very worrying because these are two countries that are natural enemies for a very simple reason. Russia is full of resources with not a lot of people in this vast stretch of the Russian Far East. Siberia, Russian Far East is huge. Just south of the border is China with 1.4 billion people hungry for resources, low on space. That's a disequilibrium. And at some point, they may well turn on each other. But for now, they have a shared enemy, and that's us. And they have been making common cause. Xi Jinping came to power in China in 2012 as the boss of the Communist Party, general secretary. That's the most important position that he holds. Putin had been in power at that point since New Year's Eve, 1999. And they began very much cooperating with each other, holding joint military maneuvers. So their militaries know how to interact if they start fighting together against, say, us. They signed trade deals, and most very ominous and symbolically freighted, but I think actually practically important. At the beginning of the Olympics, which never should have been held in China, but were, Vladimir Putin went there as an honored guest of China's dictator, Xi Jinping. And they released a joint statement that was effectively a long, fascinating document. You can look it up online. It's worth having a look. It's very ominous. Effectively a declaration of a new world order in which Russia and China are the ascendant powers. And there they cast the US as this declining power that gets in the way of progress. And they set out a whole list of things they proposed to do together. And I think part of what Putin was doing, he came back from the Olympics, and the day after the Olympics ended, Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin in Moscow gave a speech laying claim to Ukraine and anything else he wants, basically. And then 2 days later, less than 2 days later, launched the invasion, went in. You have to figure that along with the joint declaration and all the things they plan to do together at the UN and in international organizations, they reached an understanding about how they will sequence their various predatory activities. China has already, over another heartbreaking story, has already over the past 2-3 years gutted Hong Kong, which was one of the world's great free societies, and is now basically a cloistered place of terror with Chinese security agents operating openly. Democrat is some of the world's most articulate voices for freedom and democracy in prison. Jimmy Lai, Joshua Wong, spanning the generations, a whole raft of brave Hong Kong lawmakers you never heard of. Hong Kong, the world watched. We stood with Hong Kong too. It didn't stop him. His next target is Taiwan, which is an amazing place. Taiwan is claimed by China. We should not regard it that way. Taiwan is a democracy. When people say, well, but can democracy really work with Chinese society in Asia? Oh, well, yeah, look at Taiwan. It's effectively a country of more than 20 million people. They have a democracy, they have free speech, they are one of the world's most important economies. They've been amazing, and they've done all that while being shunned. They're not allowed to join the United Nations because China doesn't want them there. They're not even allowed to sit as an observer at the World Health Organization. Taiwan is a great example to much of the world. And I keep thinking, Taiwan's president is a woman, and she has been really marvelous in standing up to China, both measured and firm, which is really a David and Goliath situation. There's huge China, there's little Taiwan, but little Taiwan has it right. It's an incredible example. Tsai Ing-wen is the president of Taiwan, and I keep thinking of her as we watch this incredibly brave president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky.
Again, going back to leadership mattering.
Yes.
Matters.
I keep trying to imagine how much courage it must take. We're seeing the courage with President Zelensky in Ukraine right now. How much courage does it take to be President Tsai Ing-wen of Taiwan, knowing that you're the next target for China, seeing what's happened in Hong Kong, watching what Russia is doing in Ukraine after that joint declaration between Russia and China over how they want the New World Order to work. And there's Taiwan in front of China's missiles, guns. I mean, China is a massive military power at this point. Xi Jinping's been building it up. It is vital in that scene that we really ride to the rescue with skin in the game, with guns in the games, that we do not let it get to the point where China overtly launches an attack on Taiwan.
Yeah. Claudia, what would you like to see the U.S. do with Ukraine and international organizations like NATO, UN? Can you briefly share what you think should happen?
Yeah. Well, the single most important useful thing that President Biden could do today, and it would actually be a help, it wouldn't even hurt. He's been saying, well, you're going to hurt because sanctions will raise gas prices more, like they aren't high enough. He could reopen US energy. It would be great. It'd be wonderful. It would bring down the gas prices. It'd be good for you. It'd be good for me. We would be pumping gas. It'd be bad for Vladimir Putin. And unlike sanctions, which are complicated, messy, leaky, tend to erode, difficult to enforce, et cetera, it would simply be a brilliant, useful move. He could reverse the stupid policies he's put in on that. That's number one. You could do that at zero cost to great benefit. At the UN, we need to just keep standing up. I don't see the UN as a place where anything really is going to get done. They stand with Ukraine, but Russia has a veto at the UN Security Council. Even if it didn't, the UN as a rule does not stop wars. It's supposed to be its job. The UN is much better at lining its own pocket and virtue signaling to the planet. But with NATO, at least this has resulted in Germany getting better back on board. The Germans had developed this lifestyle, unfortunately, which was sort of involved a very small military and a very large dependency on Russian gas. Okay, that was not a good mix. And they're the linchpin.
Think that balance.
Yes, that may be starting to shift. I will believe it has really shifted if the Germans actually tear out the Russian pipelines, because as long as they're still there, they can pump gas. They can open up that Nord Stream 2 pipeline where they've now said, you know, because of Ukraine, we're suspending Nord Stream 2 Russian gas to Germany. Well, the pipeline's there. All they need to do is sign some things on paper and they can start it. I wait to see how Germany handles that. But at least one of the most terrible things that Germany did was the little Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, who are on Putin's target list, sort of very high at his target list after Ukraine, wanted to send weapons to Ukraine. Estonia was trying to ship weapons systems. And as if the Baltics themselves don't need them. I was thinking, why isn't the US doing more? You know, why are we leaving it to the Baltics? Well, these were German origin weapons. They needed Germany's permission to do that. Germany last month said no. What? Yeah, no, the NATO, Germany. Okay, Germany has now reversed that. That's good. Germany is now doing a number of things that look a lot better. Fingers crossed, their new chancellor continues in that direction. But that's a trust but verify kind of thing. Let's see if they stick to it, because Russian gas, that's like cotton candy, you know, that's hard to resist. And that's Germany's big temptation.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Claudia, for sharing with us your insight on this complex and complicated topic, but it's something that all of us who care about freedom here in the United States and around the world should be paying attention to.
Thank you so much for taking an interest in this. It matters to the future. It matters so much for all of you to the future, what's being decided right now. Thank you.
And as we end, Claudia, could you share where people can follow you on social media?
Yeah, sure. Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. If you go there, you'll find lots on this. You'll find lots of other interesting things too on all sorts of policy. Basically, it's all about freedom in many dimensions, freedom and free markets.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Claudia.
Thank you.